Hello everyone, I hope you've had a good week so far. We've really been enjoying quite a variety of weather. We started off May with a really hot day on the 1st, and last week we were back in sort of winter clothes and jackets and leggings and what have you, so it's a bit varied. But today is a beautiful day, and I thought I'd like to show you how to make some quick and easy labels and ephemera tags so that you don't need to stress too much about not having the right equipment. We're going to be using today some sketch paper. This is 150 GSMs and I've got 40 sheets there. I'm going to be using my set of Winsor & Newton watercolors. I have some sprays here. They're a combination. I've got an oxide spray. The oxide sprays normally just have white gouache added to a spray stain that makes them the oxide. So I've got a couple of colors there. I'm going to be using my archival ink, which is acid free, permanent and waterproof, and that's important because we are going to be working with water today. And then I have a whole selection of different stamps, and these you can pick up online. You know, there's just many varied. I'm going to flip them over because it's usually easy to see on the printed side. So there's a whole lot of small sort of invoice type stamps. Those would be quite nice to have just in your stash. The insects I've thrown in just to see. If I've got a bit of space at the end of it, I might use one of those just to see how this technique works with a different design. I've got some labels I'm going to use. Oh, excuse me. Some more labels. I have this typeset with numbers and a few letters and symbols. I've got some labels, field label, stamps, and some more. So I'm going to just set up quickly so that you can see what I'm doing, and we'll start the process together. So I'm going to start my stamping just using a whole sheet of stamps, and this is the one that has the small invoice type stamps on them, and you'll see that they fit pretty much across the width of the page, and I should get 2 of those down. So the process for all the stamping is going to be the same, and as I mentioned, you do want to use a waterproof ink because you are going to get a wet surface. So you're going to carefully ink all over your stamps. You might find, because you're working with such a large area, that there'll be 1 or 2 areas that are perhaps lighter when you print them, and don't worry, that will just add to your vintage grungy kind of look. Okay, so I'm going to stamp this first one up at the top. You want to grip just between the stamps so you don't get too messy on your fingers. I'll bring that forward. We can see I can lay this down here, and then hold it still with your one hand and rub over the surface from one side to the other. When you've done this first print, if there are any areas that haven't printed well, you'll be able to see where those are for next and then pick them up. That's rather lovely. Got quite a nice vintage feel about it. So I'm going to just repeat this a second time. And then once I've done this, I am going to stop talking and I will just continue working with the other stamps so that I can speed up the video and you won't become too bored. But you can see how quickly, by doing this method, you'll be able to mass make your ephemera. Loving that. So we're going to come and colour that just now. I'm going to give it a moment or 2 for the ink to dry, and I'm going to carry on stamping. So the next part of our making mass ephemera will be to put a little bit of color on here, and I'm going to use some of my distressed sprays and distress oxide sprays just to get a little bit of interest on here. So this one is Lost Shadow, and I'm just going to spritz some of this. This is just a plastic file folder, and I'm just wanting to create a little bit of a background that I can actually pick up on my stamped card. So I'm going to do that, and let's just maybe do a bit of fossilized amber. We want those sort of nice vintagey colors. And then I have a little spray bottle here that has just got normal tap water in. So I'm just going to mist over this and just try and move the colors around a little bit. Yeah, that one didn't do quite what I was thinking, but I am going to make it fairly wet. That's it. Right, so I'm not going to put the whole thing down as a flat sheet. I'm just going to hold my paper in a sort of a U shape and just dip various parts of it into the color, and then I'll do a flip over and have a look. Oh, look at that. How gorgeous is that? Right, let's carry on. Love that. And it doesn't matter if the whole page isn't covered. Right, at this stage, if you do have quite a lot of ink on your piece of card, you can go in with your water to get this to move around, and just to soften the colors up a bit. Remember that they will dry lighter than they are at the moment. So I'm going to use this water just to help move the color. And then I will set this aside to dry. I love the fact that it's quite drippy in some parts. And I think we might just drip some back on here. That's onto our plastic sheet. Remember that each of your little stamped images is just going to be a very, very small surface area, so you're not going to see an awful lot of it. Now I'm going to take a second page, and I'm going to do what we know as a butterfly print. So I'm going to start by placing my corner edges on the edge of the card and just gently roll it down, and I'll pick up some of this color on here. So it's really two for the price of one, isn't it? Love that. That's absolutely gorgeous. I might just prefer to have a little bit more of a browny tinge there where there's quite a lot of yellow. Yeah, so I'll just soften that and a little bit of that. So I'm going to leave this to dry now, and I'll carry on with the next sheet of card. Sorry, one's never got enough space. So I've got a fair amount of ink on here, and I think I might like to introduce another color. So I'm going to introduce some speckled egg, because I always love blues and browns together. They just seem to really do it for me. Right, so make it a little bit more blue. So I'm going to pick up some of this ink now, using my card again. I'm just dipping it in to various corners. We'll see what we get. Yeah, so I haven't picked up quite as much, but look at those lovely markings there. That's really brilliant. So we'll get a bit more of the speckled egg. Yeah, loving that. You can see that there really is no right and wrong way, and because these inks are transparent, when you are picking up the inks like this, you will be able to see the stamped image that you've got underneath. Maybe what we'll do here is just to do the butterfly pickup at this stage. So we'll take our second piece of card down the corners and just pick up that ink. If you don't have the spray inks, then you could also use your stamp pad inks. That's fine. Those are lovely. and this is equally lovely, but I think I'd still like a little bit more color in some of these areas. So I'm going to come back in now and just pick up a little bit of the blues. And its speckled egg is really just a lovely, lovely soft blue. Yeah, I'm going to leave that as is. Maybe just move some of this concentrated color around a little bit. Very much reminiscent of a stain, isn't it? You can manipulate this as much as you like. I think here for that big blob, I'm just going to spritz that with water just to soften that out. Okay. Yeah, that just gives it a bit of more water just to swim around in and carry the color down. There we go. I'm going to leave that. I quite like those markings. And then I'm running out of space, aren't I? Oh dear. Let me use this bottom edge just to mop up some of this color here. We don't want to waste any of this beautiful mixture. That's it. And I'll do the same with this corner here that I've got for that image. There we go. Isn't that lovely? Because it's got so many different colors in the one. And I'll do the same over here. There we go. Right, so I'm happy with those pages. And now I've just got the last couple to do with the inks. And I think we might go for slightly different colors. And let's see, I might introduce here a little bit of this lumberjack plaid. It's quite a strong color, so maybe just 2 squirts will be enough. And blue and red make purple, so let's add some speckled egg into the mix. And I'm going to keep this one fairly light, so let me just dip this one into the mixture, pick up some colors. That's lovely. Yeah, I'm going to keep that one just as is. So it's almost like you've had an ink bottle on your desk and it's spilt over. And then we've got one more to do with the inks. Where did I put it? Up here. For this one, I'm just going to lay the whole sheet down and pick up whatever color I've got. So I've got quite a lot of reds here, and I've got the birds here. So I think I might quite like to have them in some of the red colors. So I'm going to lay this down onto my plastic sheet and pick up as much of this ink as possible and wait for the surprise. Yeah, that's really nice. And then we'll just pick up a little bit of color here and maybe some down in this bottom corner. So when you're doing these, it is quite nice to have some of your labels and your stamped images with quite dark colors, because that will suit some of the things you're going to do. But the lighter colors will also be brilliant for other projects. You know, for instance, if you were doing something along the lines of a seaside journal, those kind of colors would be really nice, where the other ones would be quite strong. But these for a field notes diary would be fabulous. And we'll just pick up a little bit of red along these passport tags here at the bottom. Yeah, I'm going to leave that as that. So the next one I'm going to do is showing you how to use your watercolors to create a similar background. So this piece of card I have already covered with a bit of watercolor. You can see that the colors are quite different to the distress sprays and the distress oxides. They're slightly more subtle, which watercolor will do. However, there is one thing that you need to know about watercolor, is that if you put more liquid over this, you can get the color moving. So that's the only thing that you need to be aware of. You could spray it with a bit of hairspray that you just get from your supermarket. That will act like a fixative, and it will stop the colors mixing around so much. So that one's pretty subtle. Now, what I'm going to do with this one now is just to take my watercolor box and get myself a brush And I'm just going to spritz a couple of these colours with a bit of water, just so that I can play around. I'm wanting to keep my colours more or less earthy tones, maybe a little bit of green. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of the yellow ochre, and I'm going to put water on my paper first because I want the colours to move, and that's the lovely thing about watercolours, they will move. Maybe what I'll do is turn the paper this way. Right, so I'm going to just use this over the wet surface, and I'm going to be picking up a few little random colours in between just to get going. The first one was yellow ochre, the other one was a sienna. I've got a little bit of yellow here, which is a slightly brighter colour. I'm going to pick up a raw sienna. And I'm not showing any masterful skills in doing this. I'm just spreading the colour on. Let's have a bit more of the browny colour. There we go. But this immediately will just give you some colour to your design without you having to go and become a watercolour artist overnight. Right, these are for the bugs, and we'll have a little bit more of the orange here. Picked up some firebugs at work the other day. I didn't have my glasses on and we were emptying out a compost bin. Oh my goodness. I thought, oh my word, I've got about 400 ladybugs here. But actually when I went back inside and looked at the picture with my glasses, it was very different. It wasn't 400 ladybugs, it was actually all these firebugs, but it was really lovely to see them. So over these little letters and numbers, I'm also going to just do random colours, but I'm going to stick more with the colours of the inks that you would normally find if you were using a dip pen. So you would normally get a blue, a black, a green, blue, black, green and red. Hey, so I've got some red. Let's get a little bit of the blue. We'll go for quite a nice bright blue, and then maybe mix a little bit of ultramarine in just to soften it. Put a little bit of the green, and these will just be fun little accents if you're doing something like a cluster or maybe something on a tag, just something that you can add in. I've done a bit of red. I'm not going to do black because I just feel that that's too harsh. Do a little bit of brown mixed in. That's okay because you do get a sort of a sepia kind of an ink. And then maybe with some of the ones at the bottom, I'll do a slightly different green and possibly a little bit of the yellow ochre. Yeah, I think that's good. Your color wave will be really what you want. So you could do a color wave of just yellows, you could do a color wave of just the blues or the reds. These are mostly sort of travel kind of stamps here. So quite often they would use blue kind of inks, or they could use black. And really you're just playing around. Watercolor will always dry lighter, quite considerably lighter if you're not used to it, so don't be surprised, but it is really beautiful to be able to use it and know that you still get lovely colors even though they are lighter. Right, maybe just soften this with a bit of yellow ochre. Yeah, we're off to sunny Australia if we've got these colors, aren't we? I've got friends that have just landed there at the moment, and most of my cousins are in Australia, so good family ties. My grandmother was from there. She was an opera singer from Melbourne, and yeah, it was said, although I never heard her sing, that had she continued singing once she had her children, she would have been one of the world's greatest opera singers. So maybe one day I'll just show you, for interest's sake, all her programs of where she's sung all over the world, bearing in mind that in those days all the travel that she had to do was by boat, so it was quite tedious, you know, a couple of weeks on the boat to go and sing in the UK for the Queen, and then a couple of weeks on the boat back home again. Yeah, but always lovely to sort of delve into one's family history, isn't it? Right, so I'm quite liking those colours. I think I might add a little bit of a brown in here. Yeah, let's move those along and we'll do this last section. So although they are brighter than the oxide inks and the distress sprays that we've used, they will nevertheless fit in with one or two of your projects, if not more, because they are just a little bit different. Once this is dry, I'm going to start cutting them out, and then I'll be able to show you what they look like once we've actually removed them, so that you can see them individually, because a lot of the background color is just going to fall away. So you're really just going to see tiny snippets of what I'm doing here, and yeah, they'll be a lovely addition to a stash. It's a very, very easy way to mass make your ephemera without having to go to too much expense of having to buy stuff, because it can be quite costly. Right, so I'm going to let this all dry. I'll come back and show you what they look like when they're completely dry, so that you can see the contrast in how much the color fades. But if you have a look here at the watercolor on this section, you can already see that it's softening up quite a lot as it is where the bugs are. It's really quite different to when it was wet. Okay, so I'm going to let this dry. I'm going to maybe make a cup of tea, and then I'll show you what it looks like before I cut it out. Right, so my papers have all dried now, and I'm just loving the colors that I've got here. I love these soft colors in between, and even the dark ones aren't quite as dark once they've dried. Here's the next one. This has got less ink on it, but nevertheless you've picked up enough interest, and if you wanted to, you could always coffee dye this afterwards. Here's another one with that similar color palette, and then we've got some more of the earthy kind of coffee tones from the ground espresso. These ones with a bit of green are lovely, because this is to do with field notes, so that would be a nice addition. And as I said, these ones are quite dark, but once they're cut out and you've got them separated, you'll see that they're rather beautiful. That's just like a burst of sunshine coming through the clouds, isn't it? And here's the watercolor one that's actually really very, very subtle indeed. And here was the first watercolor one that I did. So they've got much softer colors, and because I was working wet on a wet background, yeah, they just don't allow the ink to soak into the paper straight away, so you can spread it more easily. And even those very, very dark colors up at the top here have subdued quite a lot. So what am I going to do now? I'm going to spend the next hour or so cutting some of these out, and I'll show you what they look like when they're finished. Well, here we have it, the finished product. We've got all the ephemera that we made together just now, all cut out, and what you will notice here is that although some of the card looked really dark, most of it is fairly light. There are a couple where the actual color is dark, but that doesn't matter, because it will depend on the type of journal that you're doing and how grungy you want it to be. Have absolutely loads here. I love the way that these little field identification cards have come out, and on this one I've actually left that label at the top. I thought I could use it to do some writing about the actual specimen that has been found. And then when we come to look at some of the others, and I'm not going to go through all of them because you'll see most of them, just the variety of different colors that we have, and yet you are still able to see all the text below. I'm really happy with how this has turned out, and I hope that this encourages you to get stamping using your whole sheet of stamps, and to use either some watercolors or some distress spray stains or some distress oxide sprays. Thanks for joining me. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider giving me a thumbs up and subscribing to my channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. Bye for now.